Hello, everybody. Welcome to the seventh Able Learning Session. So happy to have all of you here. We are putting these learning sessions on in partnership with Colorado Post and the Able Colorado team. So thank you to them. We're so happy to have all of you here joining us today. My name is Lindy Hoffman, and I'm with the Able National Team at Georgetown University Law Center. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce our speakers. So first, Chief Scott Fraser began his policing profession in September 1991 with the Vancouver Police Department, where he served in various roles across several areas of the city. In March 1998, Scott relocated to Brockville and joined the Brockville Police Service. Prior to his appointment as chief of police, he accepted several different assignments, including as breathalyzer technician, mountain bike officer, intelligence drug officer, sergeant in charge of criminal investigations, staff sergeant in charge of criminal investigations, and inspector in charge of operations and support services. With his solid investigative background, Scott has been invited to lecture at the Canadian Police College and act as syndicate leader within the Canadian Police College Drug Investigative Techniques program numerous times. Scott also attended the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia in July 2006. Scott left the Brockville Police in October of 2021 in order to take on the deputy chief role in Kingston, Ontario. He held that position until January 2023 when he was appointed as interim chief of police for Kingston. And Scott is also one of our Able National instructors. Now, our second presenter today is Chief Eric Holmes, who served 25 years with the Pittsburgh Police Department, retiring as the Chief of Staff prior to joining Duquesne University as the Chief of Police and Assistant Vice President for Safety. Eric has considerable executive level training, including Command Institute for Police Executives, FBI LEADA Trilogy Leadership Program, IACP Leadership in Police Organizations, United States Secret Service Law Enforcement Executive Seminar, Police Executive Research Forum, Senior Management Institute for Police, and the International Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators Executive Development Institute. Eric earned his Bachelor of Arts degree from Slippery Rock University and Master of Science degree in Criminal Justice from Point Park University. Eric believes in the principles of procedural justice and is a certified principled policing instructor. And Eric is also a national instructor with ABLE. So thank you both so much for being here with us today to talk about tackling inhibitors to intervention. We're so excited to have you. So I'm going to get started with asking a few of my questions, but if anybody in the audience has any questions along the way, I definitely want to invite you to send them in the chat, or you can message me directly. I'll be monitoring both places as we go. I will reserve a few minutes at the end for questions as well. So, as mentioned in your introductions, both of you are national instructors already, but you're also chiefs of your respective agencies. And in fact, both of your agencies are actually in the process of applying to become an ABLE agency. So this puts you in the shoes of a lot of folks who will be watching this learning session and wondering how they can make sure that as chief or as program coordinator or as instructor, that the program gets rolled out successfully. But I really want to narrow in on the role of the chief. So what do you think the role of an agency chief is when it comes to tackling inhibitors to intervention?
Do you want me to go ahead, or do you want to take the lead here? Okay, so certainly from the Canadian perspective, I've got to take my hat off to the U.S. Counterparts, who really this is derived from, and has taken a little more of a lead in it. Canada's starting to figure it out now, which is great. And you know, certainly as the chief, my role is essentially you're a change agent, because you know, policing unfortunately is we use the process of, we all show each other how to do things, and when we do that well, it's great, but when we do it poorly, it's not good, because we pass along bad habits. So certainly from my perspective, in a kind of a smaller service, we only have 220 officers here, but at the end of the day, being the pioneer of change sometimes has to come from somewhere, because as the saying I always use here, the only people who like change, there's a baby with a wet diaper. Nobody else really likes it. So you need to really broadcast it, and from the top down, being that change agent, which will hopefully derive bottom up buy-in. And that's kind of where my perspective as a chief is on that.
Yeah. And for me, I think it's being an ambassador, for that change, modeling that change, having those small one-off conversations about the change, building those ambassadors within the organization, explaining what ABLE is and why it's important, And we are at that apex in law enforcement right now. And, the changes that we make today will help our careers, help our profession for decades to come.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Scott. Did you have
Yeah,
something?
and sorry, just to piggyback on that too, it's really important messaging that Eric just said, because that's it. We've got to consistently bring it, because we all know as leaders in police services, if things get left and they're not talked about, they're not discussed, they start to collect dust, and then people believe that, okay, we're not talking about that anymore, so let's go back to the old way of doing things. So certainly that's a great perspective.
Absolutely. So thank you both for that. I'm going to transition kind of into talking about some of those common inhibitors, all of these that we mentioned in class, but I think these are the ones that really stick in people's minds as, the ones that we need to focus on working against. So the first one, most common, I want to talk about rank as an inhibitor. So in your experience, how has your agency handled empowering less experienced officers to intervene? And what can we do to prime leaders to model, able, and encourage interventions for, their subordinates?
I know for me, it starts from day one with the newest officers when they come in the door, letting them know, although you're the newest officer, this is your first day of field training. I give them a welcome gift, and we have a private conversation, and we talk about, you're still a leader. You are a leader, even though you're the newest officer. You're a leader. And you're a part of this organization. And so you have to develop them. And then you have to keep developing in phases as you go up the organization. Because like you said, it's really, stepping up and stepping down, from the chief to the newest officer, from the newest officer to the chief. So I look at it when we're doing our, when it comes to rank, even at the field training officer level, right? That's really the lowest level of rank there, because they're training a new officer and instilling the work ethic of the organization into this new officer. And so when you talk to your middle management, to your corporals and your sergeants and lieutenants who really, run the organization on the shifts on the daily basis, making sure that they understand the role that they have, that we all have a role to play. And there were times when, things happen, and regardless of stars and bars and shields and gold and whatnot, we all have a role to play in making sure that we are each other's professional keeper.
Yeah, for sure. And piggybacking on that too, rank comes with a number of things, obviously, depending what you're wearing up here on your shoulders, and stripes, and as shields and bars. And then, of course, at various levels, seniority almost becomes a rank, where, in Canada here, we have 4th class, 3rd class, 2nd class, 1st class constables on the road. And there is kind of the unwritten hierarchy that runs there. And the way I look at this is certainly for us, it's the almost the programming of the new people coming forward, where we're programming them with this new kind of perspective that everything's new to them. So they're drinking from the fire hose already. But then we're deprogramming our people who've been here for an extended period of time. And certainly, as we know, many of us who've got many years on the job, all those names that recruits were called, the pen, or, the piss kid, or whoever you were. And when you are treated that way, you carry that with you as though it's a badge of honor that you now get the ability to teach somebody else that, and show them that, hey, I'm in charge and you're the junior person on the ship. So trying to eliminate that in policing culture, that's probably our biggest challenge, because it is just more of the same, and that's not the way we did it. This is the way we've always done it. And trying to get people to think, okay, just because that's the way we've always done it, we don't have to always do it that way. Let's try somewhere else. But it's like anything. It's like riding a bike. We always come back to that process. So that continual change, but it's very difficult when you have that rank, the unwritten rank, the hierarchy, recruits versus senior members. It makes it very difficult. And until your whole organization understands ABLE and is trained, it's very tough. But if it was easy, we'd all be doing it, and would have been done years ago. And frankly, I think a lot of us, after we've taken this training, you're looking, going, when it started, you say, we don't need this. We're already doing this. Then when you get through the training, you're like, okay, we're not doing this consistently, or we're not doing this efficiently, and we're not doing it properly. So trying to bundle that all together, it's certainly a barrier, but by no means is it, something that's going to stop us from moving forward.
Would you encourage supervisors to talk to their subordinates and give them express permission to intervene on them?
That's a good, that's a good idea. When you're having your briefings, you're having your informal trainings and even your informal leaders, letting them know that it's okay to, hey, step in if you see something that's amiss. It's important to do that, to break down that barrier, right? To let them know that it's okay to extend your hand across to them and say, if I'm involved in a situation or if I'm, going off the rails, although I may outrank you, we're still at the end of the day police officers. We're in law enforcement, right? We want to have each other's backs, men and the women working together. We know what the end goal is. And if I, don't worry about the rank, just step in, call my name, let me know. Cause I say this whenever I teach ABLE, I say, growing up, it's Eric. And then whenever I did something wrong, my parents would get my attention. It was Eric plus my middle name. Mm-hmm. And so just something like that, enough to just stop what you're doing, to redirect, refocus. So absolutely, having those one-off conversations with your supervisors is important.
Definitely.
And that's a great part of this training. That is, it doesn't matter if you've got 6 weeks on the job or 16 years, that's what we're trying to get people. That conversation is the most important part, having the conversation, because right now nobody's having it. They're not talking about that. Everybody's thinking of it, but nobody's talking about it. And it's very interesting because we're just in the application stage here in Kingston. We're close to becoming to start getting everybody trained. But our use of force people have come forward and they're like, hey, we've got a great idea this year for use of force in the box training drills we do, which are the real rapid fire kind of 10 scenarios. You have your back and then if they blow a whistle, you turn and you're confronted with an event. And in that box drill, they've designed one, the ABLE program, where they're going to have an officer doing something wrong. And so it's not going to be, you need to figure out, do you need to use a use of force, de-escalation or whatever. This is going to be a box drill exercise that forces you to do something in the intervention realm, which I'd never heard of it. And to the guys and girls down in use of force, I applauded them for it. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. But getting people to start thinking that route, because we're always thinking of our use of force options and everything at use of force is always about how do we apply it? How do we do it properly? Now let's start thinking as well. There's also the intervention technique that we may need to use with one of our own. So it's all very good.
Thank you. That's such an important discussion. So I'm really glad that we were able to address that one. I'm going to move on to kind of another common inhibitor, which is the fear of retaliation or discipline. Now, of course, if you're an ABLE agency, you would know that, we require that there's no retaliation for intervention, and we require that that is a part of your agency policy. But I still think that that fear kind of permeates in some places. So I'm just wondering kind of how you would strategize combating that fear and being really clear about that. And maybe this is from a chief perspective, and maybe this is just generally.
I think you're right about having it flow throughout your policies, your mission statement, and your value statement, but also lifting up those who do right, who do the ABLE concepts, rewarding them, even if it's just having a discussion at roll call, stepping in as the chief and saying, hey, yesterday, last evening, last night, last week, this occurred. These officers did this. Certainly modeling the ABLE tenets that we want you to use and push forward, following policy and following that duty to intervene. So certainly everything cannot be, on the whack-a-mole end of things. You have to also lift up, support, respect, show, and push forward those who are modeling the behaviors that we want them to do, the positive behaviors that we want from them.
And it's that fine line between discipline and performance management. And certainly in Canada under discipline, if someone has an informal resolution to something they've done wrong, after 2 years, it's off their record for good. But on performance management, that's something that follows them all the time. So you can continually monitor officers and you should see progression. You should see improvement. And of course, in this avenue, you want to be, as Eric says, we want to be supportive of people who come in, and we don't want it to be, as the training does, we don't want to embarrass anybody. That's not the purpose of this. You're trying to, prevent misconduct and reduce mistakes and improve wellness. Those are the big pillars that we're working on. And it's really important that we recognize this for what it is. And I think the training does a great part of it, where the intervention itself, being taught how to intervene, that's really important. What's more important is, as an officer, if someone intervenes, that you understand that, and that it's not anything more than them stepping in to help you. And I think, sometimes people, they might get their backs up and things like that, but I really like how the training offers opportunities for people to at least try it on through the role plays, but certainly teaching people that it's okay. We're not there to try and catch you doing something wrong. This is a perfect example of let's catch somebody doing something right. Mm-hmm. And really, once I think everybody's got it, it'll be much easier, but in understanding it as well. So that's certainly the path forward here.
Yeah, I'm thinking more actually, Eric, about what you said about making sure to recognize folks who are modeling this. And I'm wondering whether you both think it's appropriate for kind of being that informal ABLE ambassador, whether that's something that could or should be considered when it comes to promotion.
Absolutely. I think evaluations, promotions, when you're selecting people for specialty assignments, everything that you do in your organization, if it's going to be interwoven into the DNA of your organization, you have to touch it at every point. So absolutely, it should be a part of that promotional process.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. When you're at the point when Eric or I in our organization say active bystandership, and the immediate response is, oh, what's that? That's that. Once you've reached the point where everyone else is talking about active bystandership, then you've at least reached that plateau, and then developing, like our path forward here would be developing when we do our recognition awards, that there could be an ABLE kind of sponsored award where we're recognizing someone for their continual bystandership, positive influence, and what they're doing for the organization. Because once again, you're just talking about it again. And that's what's important, that it's continually in the forefront. And I know when we've been on the courses and we've seen the agencies, when you turn your computer on and it says ABLE, or you've got a poster on the wall that's ABLE, that it's just there and it's in the forefront.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to another inhibitor. I'd love to talk about fear of stepping in when there were past mistakes that somebody made. How would you approach encouraging someone who's in that position, like somebody who maybe has like informally a policy named after them because of something that happened in the past, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Again, many agencies have that, right? And so that person's still a member of the agency, and that person has been in the hot seat before, so they kind of recognize both sides of the equation there. And they may be the perfect person to be able to, we understand your past, history. Those things are over, they're in your past, and hopefully you learned from them. And then you could take what you've learned from these negative situations and now apply them as you move forward. You still have a lot of, you're a valued member of this organization. You still have a lot of years ahead of you. And certainly you still have a voice in this organization, and you're a part of the team. And so those battle scars from the past, use them for what they're worth to gain knowledge and education, and then allow that to help you and assist us as we move forward. Just because you have some issues in the past doesn't mean now you're silenced and put on the sideline. You're still a part of the team.
Yeah. And the good point here too is, none of us can change yesterday, and we can't change an hour ago, but we can always change an hour from now, and we can always change tomorrow. And yeah, trying to turn those negatives into positives. And certainly somewhere where I've really seen that in, when everybody who's instructed a class will have someone, when we're talking about inhibitors, they'll bring up an incident, and whether it was 13 months ago or 24 years ago, when you watch that person say, here's this incident, I should have stepped in, I didn't. I always say that has left a mark on that individual from that point. How do they remember something 23 years ago that maybe was just in the middle of a shift, but when we start talking about this, they recall it like it was yesterday? And to me, I look at that as it almost makes you a subject matter expert in this area, because you have the history of, hey, this is what went wrong, this is how I didn't do it, and this is what I should have done. Well, guess what? Moving forward, now you know how to do it effectively and efficiently, and we're giving you some tools in the toolbox to help. Now, when you move forward, hey, what's best than someone who's already been down that road, in particular, helping another officer through a tough period of time. Hey, I've been there and I've done it. And it's really overcoming that, hey, we're all police officers and sometimes we get cynical and sometimes we give up and we lose a little bit of hope. And that's where you've really got to rally around and get that person back on the bike and get riding again. But like I say, yesterday is yesterday and tomorrow's tomorrow. And let's make a marked departure from what we did to what we do. And I think it's a really positive. And whenever I talk to people about it, and certainly in our organization, hey, we can't change it, but let's learn from it and move ahead. This is a great opportunity for it.
That's great. That's really great. So I think another one is, I think a lot of officers would say that in a very clear-cut situation when an intervention should happen, that they feel like they would step in, right? But I think that there's often when it's sort of one of those gray area situations and you're not totally sure that this is what you should do, there's really that fear of being wrong and, what might happen then. So I'm wondering how you would kind of combat that one.
Yeah, certainly that is a big one. And that's probably the trickiest one. And, it's interesting because I've got a pretty good example. My daughter, who just became a police officer, and she's still with a field trainer, and she phoned me after a call. And she was like, I'm brand new. I knew what was going on. It was wrong, but I carried on doing it. I didn't know what to say or how to say it. And that's going to be our biggest challenge, is that fear. And that's the one where organizationally, once your organization understands it and accepts it, that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. However, continually, and if they didn't do it in the one incident, at least if they have the courage to talk to somebody about it, that maybe the next time they will. And understanding, once again, it's how that person accepts it. Because there's a way, maybe the individual who's going to intervene was wrong. And, but at the time, maybe not right then is the opportune time for both of them to discuss it. But afterwards, when they have that discussion, just go, hey, and then, then they have that, as Eric talked about earlier, that conversation where step in, do this. I'm not going to be offended, and we'll just debrief it after. So certainly it's going to be our biggest challenge. Every service is unique as well. So I don't think we're ever going to find that cookie cutter that works for everyone. But I think it's really important, if your people are talking about it, then at least that's the catalyst to move that, move up the grid a little bit, and continually supporting and encouraging. And if they fail to do it, then this time, that in supporting them for the next time. And even if the officer and the person talked about it, that's really the key. And that's going to develop your service as you move forward.
Yeah. And I think those are conversations that you're having with your frontline supervisors, right? That gray area, the hard issues and the mistakes that may be made. And we're all human and we're going to make mistakes, but the key is to learn from those mistakes. And you do those, like Scott said, through those debriefs, having those conversations after the fact and dissecting what occurred, what didn't occur, what could have occurred, and recognizing that we all make mistakes and having that soft landing for people if they do make an honest mistake.
Absolutely. And the social science experiments in our training, that really shows you, this is why. And I think that's a big thing for all of us, because, like, why? And whether it's the Adolf Eichmann experiment and, I'm just following orders and things like that. But it gives the insight to everybody, because that's the question I get asked a lot. Oh, I wonder why they did that. But when you start to look at the physiological effects, the social experiments, when you piece it all together, that's when the light goes on. And realistically, I think in all the training that I've done, when people see this as it is, as one thing able, it's not really comprehended. When you start to put all the stuff together, that's when you start to see people uncross their arms and their eyes open up a little more. And, so it's a really important part of it. But all of those pieces are really important. And in the training, driving those social experiments home is huge.
Yeah. Scott, you mentioned something earlier that I think is really interesting. And you briefly mentioned that sometimes it's about how you accept an intervention, right? And making sure that, folks are equally prepared to understand that they might be intervened on. And maybe someone thought that they were getting angry in a situation where maybe about to snap. And maybe you as a person know that you wouldn't have snapped, right? But that person intervenes on you and you're like, you start to feel a bit defensive. Maybe you're like, did you think I was going to do something? Like, of course I wasn't, but I think that's really important and really hits on kind of inhibiting that fear, because if you know that either way, if you intervene, whether you're right or wrong, that the person is going to understand what you were doing there, and you can kind of put away that defensiveness for a second and say, okay, I understand why they could think that something might have happened, even if I know that it didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and a great example of that one is, anytime you get spit on, we all hate that, and who doesn't?
Yeah.
But you know what follows. I know what follows. I've been there, and every officer I know, when someone spits on you, it's generally going to be followed up with a haymaker from the officer hitting the person, and so it's almost like in slow motion when you're seeing it happen, because you just want to get over there and at least separate the two, because we know what's going to come after, and for the most part, you're hoping that it's not going to, but generally emotions take over, and those things do. So it's exactly that. And hey, once in all, and I guess I applaud two agencies where the partners get to work together for extended periods of time. That and it's not all, but certainly for those two, they become a pretty cohesive unit. Makes it a little easier than like we run a lot of one man or one person cars here, so it makes it a little hard. So you may not know everybody's intricacies, but at least if you're talking about it and not afraid to do it, you may intervene. If it's 1 out of 4 and one's going to be the bad one, that's what we're trying to stop.
And that's where, as a leader, as a chief, you need to let your supervisors know. They need to know the temperament of their team on their shifts, that litmus test to know that, this officer may have a short fuse, this officer's fuse may be a little bit longer, but they need to know the temperament of their team.
Yeah,
and that's a great point for sure, because that's key right there, and driving home that management side of it, where they're understanding, because they're hearing the calls on the radio, and then that may be the ones that they know, okay, hey, we need to have these people together, or I need to get my my butt over to that call, because I know what's going to happen. So that's a great point, Eric.
Yeah, and that actually feeds into a question I was going to ask later on, but I might as well talk about it now. So, I mean, both of you are chiefs. You know that, agency culture is on both of your minds. Theoretically, based on the size of your agency, obviously, if you work in a very large agency, it might be different, but you probably know who some of those people are that come to mind when you're like, either this person there might be some pushback, or this person, they're just in your mind. You're like, okay, I'd better like think about this as I'm moving forward, right? So, as you're rolling this program out, how are you kind of keeping that culture in your mind? How are you addressing those particular folks that you think might, be a bit of a problem child, so to speak?
Yeah, so for me, it's always knowing the DNA of your organization, knowing those informal leaders who may not have rank, but do have that informal rank on their shift, on the night turn shift, right? And where all the newer officers are assigned to. And so recognizing that, creating ambassadors. If you're going to roll out any new program, you're trying to change the culture of an organization. And we know culture change is slow and steady. It's like turning an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. It's slow and steady, right? And so you have to build ambassadors that support it, that understand it and recognize it, and that are there on our 24/7 shifts, talking to the individuals, riding around in the police cars with your officers and talking about ABLE and active bystandership. And so you have to build that culture change, and it starts with the chief. It starts with the chief.
And certainly identifying generally the high flyers, they come to your attention if you have bi-weekly meetings with your professional standards or internal affairs or whatever. The same names kind of crop up with similar kind of conduct, similar behavior, and generally it's not the desired behavior. And I think it's important at that point, first of all, as the chief looking at the organization, you need to look and really assess what's going on here. And do you have all of them on one platoon? And if that's the case, you know there's a deep-rooted issue. And is there a way you can, you know, separate your kind of high flyers, and then it's you know, certainly what I do here is those are the people I call up to the office, and I don't call many people up. We're fortunate, but I call them up, and it's just a matter of come on in and sit down, and let's figure out what's going on here, because you know your name is coming across my desk way too many times, and I don't want it on my desk. And what can we do to help? And excuse me. And I think it's really important when you identify who those are. And as Eric says, knowing your agency, knowing them, being out on the road, and what is there's systemic issues we need to deal with, because really the root cause, if you can get rid of the root cause, and then oftentimes if it's just an individual, if you can eliminate all the root causes, then you know it's just the individual, and now we just need to work on that. And you know, certainly as an agency who's not ABLE certified and has not provided the training yet, this for me is the opportunity for those conversations to take place with everyone about, hey, you know, we don't want your name on this desk. We don't want you on this list. And together, working together and as a unit, you can help each other. That's what this is. This is not here to boost our IA stats. This is not here to increase our discipline to officers. That's not what it's for. This is to empower you to help each other so we can prevent and avoid some of the nasty things that we've seen give the profession a black eye, which is another issue, certainly in Canada. We can't recruit anybody. We're just every police service across Canada is suffering. Nobody's applying. And where we used to have hundreds apply for open positions, we don't have any. And the majority of it is attributed to who wants to be a police officer when you can be a firefighter, which is scary to all of us, but hey, we got to get a crack at the firefighters too. But that's what we're seeing. And until we turn this bus around, it's not going to change, and it's up to us to change it. And everyone who's on this session today, it's our job. We got to change it. And this is one tool that's certainly going to help us and build public safety again too.
And I just want to also add in, based on where you're at, unions are important. I came from the city of Pittsburgh. The Fraternal Order of Police was founded in Pittsburgh in 1915, and now I'm over at Duquesne University. That's also a union public safety agency, member of the Teamsters Union. And so you have to have meet and discusses, and you have to have the union leadership, the stewards at the table, and get that early buy-in and an explanation of what's going on and why you want to do this, explaining that why. Everyone wants to know the why of everything that we do, right? Because when you know your why, then your what has more meaning. And so we have to answer that first, and then have those conversations with our unions, for those of you who have union organizations.
Mm. So I have one more inhibitor that I wanted to hit, and I think this is one of the most important ones. So with the Officer Lopez study, we introduced the idea of both gender and racial dynamics impacting intervention. I think it's just a reality that every agency faces. And so I think we really just have to talk about that. So how do you both address this, both inside the classroom and at your agency generally?
Yeah, I think that you have to, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. This is when you start talking about implicit and explicit bias, because these things do come up, right? I'm, the newest officer, but I'm also a minority officer. I'm also a female officer, and so that those types of things come into play. Or I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and so all those, so it's there, and so we have to address it. We have to understand it, we have to recognize it, and we have to have conversations to work through it. We cannot allow it to be a reason why we don't intervene or why we don't have the conversation, right? It's a conversation that we have to have. It's a tough conversation that we have to have, but talking about implicit bias and explicit bias is important.
And I think it's really important as well that piggybacking on my recruiting comments, it's even harder for us to recruit female officers. It's harder for us to recruit members of diverse communities, and all of it plays a part. History of policing, it really plays a big part in it, where people are making those decisions. Hey, what profession do I want to go into? And, you know, it'd be great if it was policing was on the top 5 for people, but certainly now we're seeing, you know, top 10, top 15, and, you know, trying to have our police service representative of our community. It's becoming very difficult. And until we can turn that around, and as Eric says, it's not easy to talk about. They're not easy conversations because no one wants to admit that it's happening. And it is. You just can't hide from it. You can't ignore it. However, like I say, I think that's a great example, Officer Lopez. You know, a female officer from a diverse background that you know, at the end of the day, has felt left out on just left alone, and nobody supporting.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be that way. We can be a lot better than that.
Yeah, I think kind of hitting on like why allyship is so important is one of those things in that Officer Lopez study. It's that you know, like you said, she felt incredibly alone in that situation. She felt like she wasn't supported, and she was wondering if it was, you know, if it was her identity that was maybe keeping people from intervening in that situation. And you never want anybody to think that. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do to your agency culture, right? So kind of being intentional about what allyship looks like, and to kind of keep that in mind as, you know, being on your radar as situations in which to intervene to make people feel supported.
And, you know, allyship is grounded in trust. Relationships are built at the speed of trust.
Absolutely.
And everyone has to understand it's global. It has a global effect. It's not an isolated incident, Officer Lopez. That's on policing in general, on policing and on that police service. You know, that's a negative mark on the record for that police service. And anyone who was in there who witnessed it, including the officers, you know, that's not what we're trying to show people that we're doing. And realistically, at the end of the day, that's it. You're trying to, once again, as we've talked about, one of ABLE's big goals is, you know, let's build back the public's trust, because in a lot of places we've lost it. And this is by no means, this is certainly the end all and be all, but this is the bridge that gets us to trust, that gets to those relationships, and that works on this whole process. And I think it's really important that we all understand that there's a lot of ground to make up, but we can do it. And you can't look at it as though this is a never-ending prophecy kind of idea. There is an end at this. We just got to get there. And I think everybody working together, that's how we do it. But realistically, organizing your service, where it's one service, and whatever one member does, it doesn't matter, you know, obviously it affects everyone. And it's a real important that people understand that.
Absolutely. So that was the list of my formal questions. I have a few others in case nobody in the audience has, you know, anything pressing on their minds, but I'm hoping that we might have some folks with some questions on this that might want to put some questions in the chat. So I'll leave a few minutes for anybody if you have anything that you wanted to ask our two fabulous panelists. In the meantime, maybe I'll just ask one more while we let people kind of ruminate on what they're thinking right now. So I'm kind of thinking about, you know, inhibitors generally and some things that we can do to be proactive about this sort of thing. So I'm thinking about your kind of hiring choices. And obviously, Scott, you mentioned earlier that, you know, you're not getting as many candidates as you'd want. So it's maybe hard to be selective, but in cases where you can be selective, what kind of characteristics are you looking for in someone that would kind of lead you to believe that this person would, you know, be one of those ABLE ambassadors one day, maybe? How are you identifying those people?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what we're seeing now, obviously generationally, we're seeing a lot of our newer recruits that are coming in. For a period of time, we were averaging about the age of around 27 to 32 in there was the average age. So people were coming in with some life experiences and things like that, some good, some bad. Certainly the generation behind, the people were getting in at 21, 20, 21, 22, still fairly young, maybe not quite as much life experience, but they've got a broader sense of, you know, with social media and things that are actually in the community affecting communities, and activist isn't the right term, but they're very aware of what's going on versus we see a lot of our younger people educating our older members about stuff that's on social media. So it's kind of an interesting concept, but for us, what you're really looking at is you're looking for that well-rounded individual who has obviously it's pretty tough at 22 to have a ton of life experience, but it's remarkable what some 22-year-olds have done in their, in between going to university or college or what, and there's during their summers while they're at school, where they're understanding the courses even that they're taking. These courses weren't offered 30 years ago. And we're seeing a lot more courses that have been offered that are providing a broader perspective to basically the world in general and to many other things. But we're starting to see that where some of our younger people actually have more of a broader expanse of what's really going on in the world versus what happened 25 years ago and kind of what's going on. I've got a rough idea. So we're looking for that rounded individual who's certainly got some education, got some life experience, and has a real understanding of, what the community needs and what the community wants. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of our recruits right now.
And so for me, it's looking at someone who understands and models empathy, someone who recognizes that this work is guardianship first, and then when needed, they can transition and be a warrior. But every day we walk in the shoes of a guardian, and we're in service to others. Also looking for someone who has a mindset and understands restorative justice, that everything does not have to be punitive, that we can give second chances. And I believe that, through your interview process and your background process, and you start to learn about the heart and the soul of the person that you are about to hire, because our work has to be in service to others.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing, Eric. Thank you for that perspective. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I think I can ask one more of my own. So I'm wondering, when you're actually instructing the ABLE curriculum, there's a lot of class participation that goes on in ABLE, but specifically with the role plays. And so I'm wondering kind of how you strategize, like how the people that you pick to model these role plays. Do you have any thought process that kind of goes into that, whether that's, teaching generally or, at your individual agency once you end up bringing it there?
Yeah, for me, I was just in Grand Junction teaching on the Teach Back Day, had two individuals who did a phenomenal role play for the class. And so as an instructor, right, you always want to make sure that you have command and control of the classroom. And if you're teaching people from your own agency, those who are have that overt A-type personality and want to give an Oscar performance, and those who are more quiet, more meek, more mild. And so you recognize the first scenario is going to set the tone for the rest of the scenarios. But you also have to understand you're talking to police officers. And so you have to sell it. And so you may not say we're going to be doing these role plays, right? You may want to say, because police officers understand that we do scenario-based training. So you may even want to pick the words, carefully. And so don't say role play, but say scenarios. And then don't be afraid to, as the instructor, if it does go sideways or we're not hitting the learning objectives, to call a timeout, to redirect, refocus, and then start it again. Because you want to make sure it's not just that we're getting up and acting, but we have to hit the tenets of the lesson plan and make sure that it's grounded in the educational outcomes that ABLE is providing.
And I think it's really important too, early on, setting the positive note, obviously, and a positive tone, and consistently, when the opportunity presents itself, is talking about how we'll incorporate this in the scenarios at the end, or the role plays, whatever term you choose. But talking about how positive it is, and I know Greg Hanna's on this, and I think he's become an expert in this part of selling the role plays. So people midway through the day are actually excited to get to them. And in policing, often scenarios are some of the things that, hey, sometimes they like them, sometimes they don't. It just depends. But when we sell that, at the beginning and during the curriculum, where you're okay, this is the opportunity, and you'll be able to use this in the scenario. And then exactly that you're picking the right people as well. And when you break into your smaller groups, okay, you have your group, and there's the people who are sitting on the sidelines, and ironically enough, oftentimes they're the ones that come out and just blow your socks off with the opportunities they have. So certainly from the larger classroom atmosphere, picking those people at the beginning that are going to make it a successful and positive event. And in the smaller groups, hey, you're just you're working with your people and making it, as I always do, and make it, even if you have to hit the pause button for a minute and regroup, it's all in a positive manner. And when it's positive and you get a few laughs, and like I say, I always love at the end of this, people, like we were out at LAPD and they didn't know each other at the beginning of the day, and by the end of the day, you thought they'd been working together for 25 years and were best friends. It's amazing that this type of training can put the people together that tightly, but it's great to see.
Absolutely. Well, okay, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, so we might be headed to wrap up pretty soon. But I guess I'll just ask, do you have any last pieces of advice for agencies getting started with ABLE?
Just stay the course. We know it's worth its weight in gold. Our profession needs it. There's a demand for it. It's the right place, the right time, and right now. This helps officers help themselves. It helps organizations help themselves. And it puts us better in line with the values of society and what they want and demand from their law enforcement professionals.
And I think it's important, front end load it, get the training in a positive manner, encouraging people. Obviously, from the top down and bottom up, it's an entire organizational kind of a change, I think, and certainly it's change for the positive. And what I've been certainly doing here as we're in the application process, I've been talking about it for a number of months, and people continually are asking and wondering why. Hey, where are you going, and why are you teaching this, and what are you doing? And having those conversations, you can see people starting to go, okay, all right, I'm a little more interested. So when the training does get here, that you have your organization trained, that you stick to the principles, that you continually reinforce, keep your service engaged, and at the year mark, you have the 2-hour retrainer to continue that and ensure that it doesn't lose its luster. It doesn't become a book on a desk that just collects dust, that it means something, and the results will come. I guarantee it. And even though my agency right now doesn't have it, I know the results are going to be coming forthwith. And I think it's going to be a morale builder for our staff at a turbulent time in policing. And, anything we can do that is not disciplinary, that is going to advance policing, it's a positive thing. And I think our people will have nothing but, you're going to have those one-offs, but for the majority, here's a positive day of training on something that is a tool for you to use in the future. And it's not being shoved down your throat, because we give them a lot of different options. There's a number of different things here. And it's not just us, the airline industry, the medical industry, we're not picking on police officers. We just want to do things better. And this is one tool that'll help us do it. And driving that home is so important.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for being here. We'll definitely hang around for a few minutes afterwards if anybody wants to ask any individual questions. But before we go, I'll just remind you all that we're hosting learning sessions every month going forward, and the recordings of our first 6 sessions and this one are available on our YouTube channel and are also linked in the instructor portal. So everyone, please look out for a future email with information on the November learning session, which will be held on November 27th. And the recording of this and the registration link for the next one will be sent around via email. So thank you everyone for joining us. Special thank you, Scott and Eric. You guys are excellent, and we so much appreciate your time. And like I said, we'll stick around. Have a great day, everyone.